let's get the show on the road. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our weekly 30-minute webinar. My name is Matt Sykes, as always, systems engineer here at Variphy, and I'll be your host in today's webinar. Today, we're joined by Dan Schmidt, aka Danimal, another systems engineer, SE over here at Variphy. For today's webinar, we'll be focusing on as-built reporting with some other tips and tricks. Real quickly here, I just wanted to start off. Actually, I apologize. I should have prefaced this. I want to advertise the Variphy house party that is less than 3 weeks away. It is 10/27. There's going to be a lot of good information covered and content, as well as a lot of prizes given away. So please feel free to visit variphy.com/party and reserve your spot. Now we will get on to today's as-built reporting. Okay. Pardon me. And we're going to start off with a quick overview of our company and what we do. We'll jump into a live demo where Dan will guide us through ways to use call analytics and dashboards to help identify certain concerns within the call manager. We'll pause for Q&A and get some of your questions answered. During the demo, if you have any questions or concerns, make sure to ask them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right-hand corner, not the WebEx chat, but the Q&A panel, please. Then after the Q&A, we will reward one lucky attendee a $50 Amazon gift card. So hang around and see what you may have won. Okay, so a quick overview of Variphy. Variphy is the preferred analytics and management solution for Cisco collaboration. We provide industry-leading CDR reports, call analytics, customizable dashboards and widgets, UCCX reporting, remote phone control, change management, but today we're going to be focusing on the as-built reporting. If you have any other questions on any of our other features, we can most certainly take them offline and get those answered for you. Okay, before we get started, we will want to announce that Variphy now offers a new service that provides managed consulting services to our customers. Variphy system engineering team will engage on a one-on-one basis to remotely provide additional consulting, unassisted reporting, dashboarding configurations, and a system monitoring assistance. This is a service that provides a dedicated Variphy SE to do all the heavy lifting of report creation, generation, dashboarding, and all those good functions and features. For more information, please contact us, and we'll be glad to speak with you more in depth about our new service offering. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the demo. So Dan, I'm going to go ahead and pass you the ball, and he will get us started on today's as-built reporting and tips and tricks.
Thank you, Matt.
Certainly.
All right, and thank you everyone for joining us this Wednesday afternoon. Like Matt said, we're going to be covering tips and tricks when it comes to our as-built reporting utility. So a few weeks ago, we kind of spoke a little bit about the change management feature and how that can benefit you. And we kind of related as a term of as an insurance policy. It's able to give you the before and after of changes within your system, being able to track down who's making those changes. This is kind of a secondary session to that. While all the information was great within the compare report, as-built reporting takes that same set of data and extracts all that information at once. As you can see here, a lot of configurations within Call Manager, if you're used to administrating Call Manager or CUC or UCCX, being able to extract all that information in a very easy or more readable format really is why we have this feature. And not only do we keep the information from the configuration set, we actually have a connection to each of your devices as well. So a lot of the information that you would see at a per phone basis in Call Manager, for instance, if I'm in my Call Manager, let me log in real quick. If I want, let's say, a device inventory, while BAT tool in Call Manager can get you some information, it's very difficult in Call Manager to get a lot of the more specific information regarding your devices, right? It would literally take you having to go into each of your phones, either configuration set or web page, the phone's web page. So I'm just going to go to one of mine here, and I will see that. Let's see. Pick on the 8961 is fine. Okay. While I browse to this phone, right, a lot of this information is unknown to Call Manager, right? If you want the phone's authentication URL, while that phone takes that information from the Call Manager's enterprise parameters, you're not able to report on that unless you have a direct connection to the phone itself. Things also like CDP information, switch IP and switch port information as we're displaying here, network information. We are scraping all of this information and embedding it into our reports. So that primarily is the main use case of why as-built reports in our application is so important. Now, in today's session, I really want to focus on some of what we have heard from our customers, some of the things that we are consistently asked about. Can you do this? How do you do this? And why it is important to users that have as-built reporting. So going back to the application here, as you can see here, you have the ability to really run a new report. So not referencing any saved report or anything like that. That's what this first option is going to be. The run existing report is going to be a saved version of previously ran reports. And you can see that these are independently named. You can name it anything, and you could throw in new one or many components within these reports. Okay. We don't want to run all existing reports. That's going to literally take all these various reports here and run it simultaneously. In our case, that will take a pretty long time, so we're not going to worry about that. Now, I do want to spend a minute and talk a little bit about system documents. We have the instance of run existing system document. So the difference between an as-built report and a system document essentially is the ability to customize and type in description information for what component you are reporting on. So I'm going to show you an example here. We have a simple system document. In this case, think of reports provided by a Cisco partner, Cisco VAR, and they are basically outlining all the configurations within your call manager system, and they type in free-form text descriptions of what you are viewing. Same concept here. So you can see that for IP telephony deployment model here. I'm going to edit this real quick. For the text description, you can type in whatever you want, and then taking that as-built report approach and then baking into the config set that we are pulling and querying from call manager. So in this report, we're seeing end users, extension mobility settings. This is a very key one, IP phone serial number, firmware, and CDP. We're going to spend a few minutes on this in just a little bit. The lines report, so on and so forth. So the document or the system documents really is just a way to customize. You can also customize color and logos on these reports as well, but just giving some extra explanation of what the data is saying. Okay, I'm going to go jump back into my as-built reporting tool here. And we're going to run the first very common report. And I recommend this report to everyone I work with just because there's so much useful information. And that is going to be the IP phone serial number, firmware, and CDP information report. This report will really contain everything you need to know about your devices. Okay, so this is the go-to report. So I'm going to say IP phone info. If you did not want to scroll through all of our different options, right, we typically group our selectable configuration options by where they exist in call manager. So here's all of our system options. If I scroll down, you'll see call routing options. You're going to see hunt group information, your route pattern information, things like that. As I scroll down further, media resource information, your media or music on hold rather. But in this case, we want device related information. So under the device category, we're going to scroll down and we're going to find IP phone serial number. We do have a find and filter in here, so I could very well do IP phone registration and it would filter down. Okay, so I'm going to add that real quick. Now this is a very, very useful report just because you're getting so much information into a single document. But to get all that information, we want to make sure that the report is ran as a CSV output, okay? CSV will contain all the fields possible that we are coded to pull from call manager or from the phone itself. These other formats, PDF and RTF, has limited real estate on documents, so you'll get a summarized brief version of the data. So in this case, I'm going to run it as a CSV document. Okay. The next step is data source or data visibility. The data source really is saying, what data set do you want to run this report against? Do you want to run it against your real live running configuration of call manager? Okay, sure. Or do you want to run it up against a historical snapshot? Obviously, if you choose snapshot, it's going to run a lot quicker because we've already discovered the information. We have all that information local to our server already. So you could see, you could select pre-upgrade or post-upgrade to call manager 12.5. These are two snapshots I have that we talked about in our change management session that we did a few weeks ago. So in this case, I'm in a lab system, so I don't have that much information. It's not going to take too much time to generate a live report. So this is querying live from Call Manager. So if I hit run report here, I'll give it a second. And we have a CSV format output. And this is basically all of the devices that exist in my lab here. If you scroll all the way to the right, you'll see that there's many, many columns information. I want to focus on why this report, what is useful in this report that an everyday administrator or maybe even not administrator can take a look at to self-discover and help troubleshoot potential issues. Okay. So the number one thing that I think we see or in our TAC group or support group is concerns around ITL certificates. Okay. Maybe you've gone through some sort of call manager migration or possibly even an upgrade, and you find that some phones did not get a new ITL certificate. So that means that this phone still has an outdated certificate on it, probably can't reach up to the new TFTP server address to pull down its new information. So what we typically will do is configure both clusters and verify just as long as we can communicate with both clusters. We would run a report against each, more so in this case, the migrated from cluster. So we've got our list of devices here, and I'm going to scroll all the way to my right. And we'll go through a lot of the URL information, the directory information, auth URL information. But notice at the end of this report, we have CTL and ITL data, okay? So specific to these phones, I want to verify if any of my phones did not take a new ITL, okay? And I immediately could see some differences in this report. Row 53 here, I could already see that the server name is my old server name. So it's I went from my 11.5 call manager to my 12.5 call manager. And notice the ITL signature. That's your key here. That's the most important. This is saying that the ITL signature is my old ITL and not the new one as it's displayed on my new call manager version. Okay. So also to the right here, some outlining CAPF server information. So the differences in this tells me that this phone, if I highlight and scroll back to the left, this phone, which is a 8851, did not successfully take the new ITL. It is in a stale state as it sits right now. Okay, so I want to troubleshoot this either by using some of the other verify utilities like phone control, which can, if you can access it, if it's on the network and it's communicable, you could either access it by IP address or by AXO query to call manager. You could erase that ITL via remote phone control, or what's also very common is to create a macro. I'm not going to get too deep into macros at this point, but you could set up a sequence of button pushes to erase that ITL certificate. Either for all the phones that we find have old ones, right? You could pick and choose what phones you want to get that so it can erase the ITL. And that will primarily be dictated by the model that you're working on because the sequence of button pushes will be different for each model phone you're working with. So that's the number one thing that we see useful coming out of this report is it does give you ITL information. Okay, number two thing is IP settings, right? If I'm looking at this report, you can obviously see that we're pulling the phone's IP address, the subnet mask, gateway information. If these phones are set up to receive DHCP addresses, a lot of times people will use option 150 on their switches and it will generate an IP address automatically. Well, this report really tells us a couple different things as far as IP addressing goes. So if I'm scrolling over to my right and I am looking here, I can see that, yes, it's got a valid IP address. It's got a valid subnet mask. And it's also got a valid default router. Now, if it were in the case of a DHCP scoped address, this DHCP or this IP address would be within your DHCP scope. Primarily, you may see some hard-coded, you may see all of them with a DHCP address. But the main thing I want to focus on here is what is my DHCP server set to? Is it an old server? Is it incorrectly coded server? I know in our lab, we hard code a lot of stuff, right? So very easily I could see that my DHCP server doesn't in fact even have a valid IP address. It's got a subnet mask address. So this will never get a valid IP address from my DHCP server. So if I were to fix this, I would want to Either, again, use the remote phone control feature or code it in manually, but I want to hard code my DHCP server to what it should be. It could be, the switch IP that is your DHCP server. It could be another completely different server. But with that, if I'm troubleshooting this in this report, we also do give you switch IP and switch port information. So the CDP information that this phone is using. So if I want to troubleshoot this, I might want to look at my option 150 configuration within my switch. I might want to look at my VLAN information on the port itself. So there you go. There's your switch IP, interface 1 on that switch to troubleshoot potential misconfigured DHCP settings on that. So that is another use case of this IP phone serial number report. Okay. And last but not least, basically what the report says, it's the IP phone serial number, firmware, and CDP information. Again, very difficult to get this out of Call Manager. You would literally have to browse each phone to log the serial number of that phone. You'll get a sense of firmware information, possibly from BAT, definitely at each phone level, but just do it in one full sweep. Running this report, there is no back and forth, right? So if I scroll over to right here, I could see my firmware installed. Okay, I could also see serial number information, which is right there. Okay, so logging this, and another use case of this would be is if I'm doing an upgrade, right? I want to verify that all my phones that after upgrade actually have the new firmware that it came with, release 12.5. So I could go through here and note if any 88s or 8900 phones have an old version of SIP firmware, right? So this is just another tool to verify if everything's kosher, if everything's up to date and all your phones are running the latest firmwares, okay? All right, so that is a couple, just 3 use cases of why the IP phone serial number report can be so important, right? You get a lot of information that is otherwise very difficult to get out of Call Manager or very time consuming to get out of Call Manager, okay? All right, so that's one report, okay? The next report I wanna talk about is references Carey's Law, okay? So for those of you that don't know what Carey's Law is basically the statute, both federally and state, that says that as a phone, within a phone system, that phone system needs to route to 911 emergencies without a dial-out access code, okay? So this goes back to a case where a child, I think it was like a 4-year-old, tried calling 911 services at a motel in Texas. That call never went through because that hotel's phone system required a leading dial-out access code. So this law came into play that says your phone system must route 911, not with a dial-out access code, okay? So going back to our application here, that would fall under our route patterns, okay? So I could say, oops, route patterns. There's my report. I'm going to add it and remove my last one. I'm just going to call it route patterns. And in this case, I know I only have a few route patterns, so that's not going to matter. I am going to run it live against my Call Manager, okay? And we are not going to require any subsets for this, okay? So really quick, we have a report. Again, this is just a lab system, non-functioning, but very easily I could see that the phone system will route a 911, so it's 9 anything. In a production environment, you will definitely see way more route patterns than this. You would see 9 dot and maybe specific area codes, anything, because that tells you how to route the call out off network. But very easily, I could see that I'm routing the instance itself as 911 without a pre-dot, or meaning without a dial-out access code. This is going over my E911 partition. So just another very common use case that we see to confirm really quick without having to dig into Call Manager. My route patterns are calls routing successfully by what digits, and in this case, 911. Okay? So that's a very easy example to display. All right, the third component that I want to spend a few minutes on is a lot of requests that we've heard is customers would like a list of phones that have call forward all set, right? Maybe it's a specific maybe it's a specific group of individuals that are saying they're getting way too many calls. Maybe it's a hunk group of sorts, right? Maybe it's the service department that owns the hunt group, and when calls should be going to, let's say it's sales, we have our sales department in the Denver remote office. So knowing these couple things, right, we have our participants involved, which is the Denver sales office, and we have our customer service department, which is not in the Denver office, and that in fact the service department does, well, they operate on a hunt group. Okay, well, if we know that they're receiving too many calls as a troubleshooter, I'm going to first look into my hunt group, possibly my device pool or device pools for each of the different locations, and maybe some call routing options. So in the case of forwarded calls, right, it's very common for someone to forget to take call forward all off of their phones. With our reporting tool, very easy to discover which phones actually are not removing call forward all. And so very easily, I can run a phones report. But before I run this report, this is where we introduce the concept of subsets, right? In this example, I did not want to see every single phone. I only wanted to see a subset of phones, and that would be my Denver sales department, so my Denver device pool. Okay, a couple ways to create subsets in our application is if you are licensed for the remote phone control feature or macros, you could create subsets through those. If not, you could go into settings and then create a CUCM subset. Now I'm actually going to walk you through the steps of this and run a report here. I'm going to create a new subset. And I'm going to say this is my Denver location phones. Okay, so I want to say select my device pool for Denver. I don't really care about models of phones or partitions. If I want to create a subset specific to named phones, I could very well do that either by MAC address or description. So the description within Call Manager, as well as directory number. Okay, very easy. I just want to see all phones within Denver. So I'm just going to keep it to that, and I'm going to save it. Okay, this list is what populates the running of the as-built report in the subsets category. So going back to as-built reports, I'm going to say phones from Denver. Oops. And I want my phones report. There's a lot of options with phones in here, so I'm going to go down to my device section. And we're going to look at phones, SCCP, and SIP. Now, this will create a zip file that contains one report for SIP, one report for SCCP. I'm going to add that, and I'm going to run it real quick here. Now, notice subsets. I want to specify my Denver location subset. I'm going to run that report here. All right, here. I got it saved here. Let me open it in Google Sheets so you can see what it looks like. Quick. All right, so we got a couple phones. Actually, all right. In the case of Denver phones here, this is a previously ran report, but if that subset applied, right, this would be just Denver phones. Now, again, on the phone report, a lot of useful information, probably too much to even comprehend, but if I'm scrolling all the way over, I'm looking for information that would help me troubleshoot why phones or why calls that are going to Denver phones are going into a hunt group, let's say. So I want to see the forwarding options on this device. Okay, so we look at this here, and let's go all the way to our forward destination. Let's actually search for it here. There we go. All right, so this is my line 1 settings. So if you have multiple lines on any one of these phones, we're going to pull the information for the line at that device. So very easy, I could see that on this one device, I have my call forward set to my Hunt pilot, and that may explain why the sales group is getting, or sorry, the support group is getting so many calls from the Denver area, because all calls that would naturally go to this device and be meant for that device is actually being forwarded all to this Hunt group. So another very common use case at why you would want to run this report here. So hopefully you guys could see, there's endless possibilities. Basically any configuration that you would see within Call Manager, you would be able to extract out into reportable format. And the key here is it's a time saver. Right? You don't want to keep going back and forth and running various reports to get this information. We try to get as much information as possible into the single topic that you select here. So with that, thank you everyone for attending. We'll kind of open it up for some questions at this time. Matt, have there been any questions?
Yeah, I was going to mention, everyone, if you do want to submit any questions, there have some that have come through, but please go ahead and now we've reached the Q&A portion of the webinar, so feel free to go ahead and issue some questions into the Q&A panel. Dan, yes, we do have a couple. I'll leave you with the screen share. Stephanie asks, is there a way that I can schedule that IP phone report?
Yeah, excellent question. So with all of our reports, you could certainly schedule them. You see the last tab here is scheduled as built report. You're basically setting up the frequency you want this report, and then it actually calls out what report should be delivered via that schedule. So here you can see we're tying it to the one cluster that I have. What report do you want to be? So I could just freeform type IP phone and firmware report. There it is. Okay. If you want to apply those subsets to these reports, you could also do that. Let's say you only did want those phones out of Denver to be reported. You would select subsets Denver. In this case, it's cluster wide, and then the report output that you want. Again, remember CSV being the report that you'll get more information in versus PDF or RTF. Yep.
Thank you, Dan. All right, and this one's kind of funny. This sounds like a continuation of my webinar from last week with regards to custom labels and business units. Question is, can they run an as-built report to show custom attributes on users?
Excellent question. Yeah, so let me go into as-built reports here. This is going to be all based under our end user report. Let's see, hopefully it loads up here. There we go.
There we are.
All right, so one of our options is in fact an end user report. And what I'll do is I'll actually run this here. So I'm going to select end user, give it a name, and of course, run it in my CSV output. I want my real-time running config across the entire cluster. So we'll give this a run.
Yep, and what we're getting at here is these custom attributes that can be fed into the end users that can't be seen natively in the Cisco UCM UI.
Yep. So this is every field on the back end of the database, not necessarily the UI. Some of these fields, right, are unbeknownst to the front end of Call Manager. Well, if we're running these reports, all those custom attributes are only database specific, not UI specific. So if we scroll through, let me widen these columns here. All right, you can see here custom attribute 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As Matt showed, I think it was last week here, these feeding in from Active Directory, although they're feeding in through the Active Directory Call Manager sync, you can see that we can still report on them the same way we report the CDR aspect of it as we showed last week, but certainly showing up in as-built reports here. You can see the office codes that these individuals belong to, and then the maybe the department or whatever we have here as the custom attribute number 2. Definitely reportable within the end user report. So yeah, excellent question.
Perfect, perfect. Okay. I think that will do us on questions. So I'm going to snake the control back from you, Dan.
Thank you.
And we will get back and I will reshare my screen before I forget to do so. There we are. Okay, we're coming out of the wild right now. We've just covered Q&A. So I suppose the moment we've all been waiting for, drum roll please, who is the lucky Amazon gift card winner? And the winner is Joe Calarco. Congratulations. Woo! We will contact your account manager from Variphy here and have them get in touch with you very soon to go ahead and deliver that $50 Amazon gift card to you. Thank you all for attending today, but I do want to make you aware to register for next week's upcoming webinar if you have not already. Mike and I will be covering admin style dashboards out of UCM. So please feel free to go ahead and join our next week's webinar on 10/14. Thank you all and enjoy yourselves and be nice to one another.